here's the thing, they don't really work. They offer a short-term solution to a problem that's far too complex, a problem that transcends mere law enforcement. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work. We've tried it already here in the United States. We've tried it in St. Louis. We've tried it in Los Angeles and in New York. These repressive tactics don't work. When you say, oh, we've got a gang problem, let's send in more police. It doesn't work. In fact, it makes the problem worse in the long term. So the government changed their tactics last year, and they spent about $80,000 paying off gang members. They decided, well, the repressive tactics aren't working, so let's pay them to not shoot each other. And that worked for about 2 months, until the gang members started to get wise, and they said, hey, you better give us more money. And then the government was stuck. But, being smart SLUH High students, you know that when we're talking about the problem of violence, rarely can it be narrowed down to one single cause. So if we're talking about crime, we've got to look at all the different factors involved. The first one, obviously, no jobs. If you've got guys who are working age, they're not in school, and there's nothing for them to do, they can't afford to take care of their families, what do you think they're going to do? They're going to start selling drugs. And pretty soon they're going to start getting guns. And pretty soon they're going to start shooting each other. Families are falling apart in Belize. For a number of reasons. It's kind of a complex thing, but one statistic that's striking is 2/3 of the households in Belize do not have fathers living there. They don't have dads living there. So a lot of absent fathers. There's a growing disparity between rich and poor. For the longest time in Belize, everybody was kind of poor. And so I hear people say, well, I grew up poor, but nobody knew they were poor, because we were all poor. But now you got people who have huge SUVs, people who live in huge mansions with walls surrounding them, and then other people who live in shacks, small hovels. And they see the people who are rich, and they say, I want that, and I'm going to do anything I can to get that. And then in Belize, there aren't a lot of Belizean television stations, so we get all of our TV from the US. And they look at the ads that we have on TV, and they say, iPhones, I want an iPhone. I can't afford it, so where am I going to get the money? Oh, easy. Smash the window of a car, take it. Public institutions are failing our youth in Belize. So public institutions like churches, like schools, like the government, like the courts, they're failing because they're corrupt. They're failing because they're doing the same things that they've been doing for the last 150 years, and it's not working. In the church, we sit there in our churches and we look around and we say, why aren't there more youth coming to our churches? What can we do to make... Well, because the churches you got to get out of the church. If you want the youth to come, you've got to get out of the church. You've got to get on the street where they are. This hasn't sunk in yet. We haven't figured that out yet. Lastly, the last dynamic that's affecting all this is immigration and deportation. We have a lot of Belizeans. Any Belizean right now who has the money or the resources to leave the country, they're leaving the country. And they're coming here to the U.S. And so what's happening in Belize is you have the people who can't afford it, or maybe who don't have the intelligence to get a scholarship to leave the country. They're the ones that are left. It's called the brain drain. Now, there's another dynamic that's part of that too. That's deportation. So you have a lot of Belizeans living in Los Angeles, New York, Chicago. And in those cities, yeah, they get involved in the gangs there. They get busted by the police. They get deported back to Belize. And what do they bring with them? They bring the gang lifestyle with them. So that's part of what we're dealing with. But the biggest contributing factor is this: cocaine. 90% of the cocaine that's used in the United States comes through Belize and Guatemala. Just that narrow corridor. 90%. And most of that comes through Belize. I want to go back to this graph I showed you earlier with the homicide rate. You'll notice that it started to spike up in the year 2000, 2001. So what happened in 2000, 2001? The United States started investing a lot of money in the Caribbean islands. Before that, the drugs would come mostly overseas. They would enter through Florida or through Louisiana, somewhere along the coast there, and then be transported into the United States. The United States started investing into the militaries of the Dominican Republic, of Haiti, of Jamaica, of Dominica, of all these different islands. And so now they had boats, and they could stop the flow of drugs over water. So what did the cartels do? They decided to go over land instead. So now they take boats, they take planes, they take cars, they take trucks, they bring them into Belize because it's really easy to get into Belize. Remember how the pirates used to just hide out in Belize? Well, now the drug dealers are doing the same thing. It's easy.